Earlier, I told you that with Redux, we store our application state inside a single JavaScript object called the store. This object is the single source of truth for our application state and is accessible by all parts of the UI. For example, in an e-commerce app, our store can have properties like the list of categories, products, shopping cart, the current user, and so on. What we have in the store is entirely up to us. Redux has no opinion about it. We can use arrays, objects, numbers, booleans, essentially anything that represents the data that our application needs to function. Now, we cannot directly modify or mutate the store because Redux is built on top of functional programming principles. In the last section, I told you that in functional programming, we do not mutate state. So we cannot write code like this because our store is an immutable object. So to update it, we should create a function that takes the store as an argument and returns the updated store. So in this function, we should either use the spread operator to create a copy of the store, or use one of the immutability libraries that we talked about in the last section, like Immutable.js or Immer. Now, this function is called a reducer. I know, the name is a bit weird, and a lot of people have complained about it, but let's not worry about it for now. All that matters is that a reducer is a function that takes the current instance of the store and returns the updated store. Now, here's a question. How does the reducer know what properties in the store it should update? Should it update the shopping cart, or the current user, or the list of products? So we need another building block called an action. An action is just a plain JavaScript object that describes what just happened. Examples are the user logged in or logged out or added an item to a shopping cart and so on. These are the events that can happen in our application. So we should give this reducer an action as the second parameter. Now, based on the type of the action, the reducer will know what properties of the state to update. Now, doesn't mean that all the updates are going to happen inside a single function or a single reducer. No, this is just a simplified example. In a real app, our store can have many slices. For example, here we have 4 slices: categories, products, the shopping cart, and the current user. Each reducer will be responsible for updating a specific slice of the store. As a metaphor, think of an organization with multiple departments. Each department should have a manager that is responsible for their own department. They don't have to worry about the other departments. So these are the 3 building blocks in Redux applications. We have the store, which is a single JavaScript object that includes our application state. We have actions, which are plain JavaScript objects that represent what just happened. It would be nicer if they were called events, because in programming, an event represents what just happened. We also have 1 or more reducers, each responsible for updating a slice of the store. You can think of these reducers as event handlers or processors. I think the reason they're not called event handlers is that quite often event handlers are associated with object mutation, which is something we don't do in Redux. These reducers are pure functions, so they don't touch global state, they don't mutate their arguments, and they don't have any side effects. They just get the current store instance and return the updated one. Now, how do these building blocks work together? Well, when the user performs an action, let's say they add an item to their shopping cart, we create an action object and dispatch it. The store object has a dispatch method that takes an action. It will then forward this action to the reducer. So we do not call the reducer directly. We just work with the store. The store is in charge of calling the reducer, okay? The reducer computes the new state and returns it. Next, the store will set the state internally and then notify the UI components about the update. These UI components will then pull out the updated data and refresh themselves. You're going to see all these interactions in a few minutes. Now, you might be wondering why Redux is designed this way. Why do we need these building blocks? Why do we need to dispatch actions? Well, this dispatch is like an entry point to our store. So by dispatching actions, we're essentially sending every action through the same entry point. So we have a central place where we can control what should happen every time the user performs an action. This allows us to do some really cool things. For example, we can log every action. This is how Redux DevTools works. It shows every action that has been dispatched and how the state has changed. We can also easily implement undo and redo mechanisms. So that's the idea. Over the next few videos, I'm going to show you all these building blocks in action.